in the guy in the pew, and I still am that guy, Jeff Davis. And what we try to do here on Guy in the Pew is we take life's big questions and we look at them from a biblical point of view. And so to help me do that,
we discover or rediscover the spark of romantic love.
the
You
spark.
remember that spark that, you and Valerie had before all those kids and jobs and
Yeah,
just kidding. I'm sure you still have a spark.
absolutely,
I see it.
absolutely.
When you look in each other's eyes, it's there. There's a sparkle.
once
So,
once in a blue moon.
oh man, don't let her watch this. So, um, but we're talking about love, and we're going to be in a book of the Bible called the Song of Songs, sometimes
Yeah.
called the Song of Solomon, written by King Solomon, which is kind of funny. Well, because this guy had a pretty jaded experience of love.
Yeah.
I don't know. He really liked the ladies.
And the ladies liked him.
They
It
did.
sounds like.
Yeah.
So
So like I said on the Sunday sermon, all the single ladies.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, dude had 300 wives, had 700 concubines. So, doesn't seem like this would be the guy to like write a book about true romantic love,
Yeah,
since he
yeah.
seemed to be kind of a user. And but that's kind of sort of the magic of it is that this guy found love.
Yeah.
Now, we technically don't know whether this was maybe the woman that he falls in love with. Her name's Shulamith, and it could
That's a
be.
beautiful name. It
Yes,
just
it's
rolls
gorgeous.
right off the tongue.
It could be that Shulamith fell in love with, and Solomon fell in love like at the very beginning before he got the 299 other wives.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and and it just kind of and that kind of just goes to show that like if you don't nurture your
Mm,
romantic
yeah.
love, you really can lose the spark and the magic. But it's also possible that Solomon at the end of his life repented and was like, wow, maybe I should have married a few hundred less. You know,
Maybe.
that and I think there's evidence, the fact that he wrote the book of Ecclesiastes at the end of his life
Yeah.
shows he did turn back to God after he gave himself over to all forms of sexual pleasure and riches and just the things of this world,
Yeah.
and not God. Not to say that wealth or sexual pleasure can't be blessings from God. They can, but anyway, he gave himself wholeheartedly to those and not God. And I think it's very possible that at the end of his life he found Shulamith, and it was just kind of like this like reminder from God of like, hey, there's something so much better than what you've been experiencing,
Mm.
because he's been chasing after fulfillment and all these different things, and then the Lord gives him fulfillment in a loving relationship with this woman. But either way, this book is entirely devoted to love, romance, sex. The first real 3 chapters of the book are all kind of like the courting, dating, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. I don't even know. Stacy, you're a millennial. What is it called now? When I was a whippersnapper, we called it going out. Like, are you going out with her? You know, what do you call it, Stacy? Hanging out. Hanging out. Wow, that's good.
It's gotten more
Some-
casual, it
It
seems like.
it
'Cause,
does.
like back in like 100 years ago, it was courting.
Yeah. Yeah, like in 10 years it's going to be like just text messaging.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
are you texting with her yet?
Winking, slow.
Sitting alongside.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Sitting on a park bench. You remember the early days whenever you like, you like kind of scoot a little close to her and you feel her leg with your leg,
Yeah.
and it's like that thrill that goes up your spine. You're like, wow,
It is
touching her
yeah,
leg.
yeah. It is interesting. It's
Yeah,
so it
because I mean, so I have a good marriage, right?
Yeah.
But I won't say that I feel like a thrill go up my spine
yeah.
when my knee touches hers, you know?
Yeah.
But it's also
Yeah.
different. Love transforms over time, and that's
Yeah.
actually what this chapter talks about too, is the development of love and the deepening of
Yeah.
love over time. Um, so kind of the way I thought we'd begin to answer this question. So I do want to ultimately get, so you can help me stay on track. I do want to ultimately get to like how love deepens over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for starters, I think it's important to answer why it's even important to ask this question. The question again being, how do we discover or rediscover the spark of romantic love? It's easy to lose that spark.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are. A lot of people have. And in a culture like America, where there's so much like with Hollywood and all this, and we grew up with these sort of fairy tale pictures. It's like we grew up with this idealistic picture that, and
Yeah.
especially when it becomes like you put God into the picture and it becomes kind of Christianized, it's like, I have a soulmate. God will
Mhm.
drop this soulmate out of his heaven's goodie bag,
Yeah,
and
right.
this soulmate will land in my lap.
Yeah.
And if it's true love, we will live happily ever after.
Yeah.
And if it's
Yes.
not true love, then it won't work. And I honestly I see this in the super super sad scenarios when marriages don't work out. I've seen people completely redefine the history of their marriage. Like, I never really loved him. I never
Right.
really loved her.
Which
And
is
I'm like, BS. I
Yeah.
know that you did. You told
I
me you did.
yeah.
I saw the bounce in your step and the light in your eye. I
Yep.
know that you did.
Yep.
Um,
So this subject it can easily get me on my soapbox.
mm,
Because I've people that know me are probably gonna do a slight roll of the eyes because I've said it so
I
many
just
times.
rolled the eyes. You didn't see it on the camera. There it is. Okay, go.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, so give me your soapbox. What you got?
Because I believe that that there may be other. I'm sure there's other factors, obviously, but I do think that Disney movies and things in those in just the fairy tale in and of itself
Mm-hmm.
has kind of, especially in our modern culture. Uh, I mean, you can. I have not done the numbers, but just experientially, I've looked over my lifetime and looked back in the past little bit, and you can see that there is kind of a correlation between Disney and the decline of marriage, and it's like you were just saying, the idea of, I'm gonna find my soulmate, and they're just going to appear
Mm-hmm.
one day out of, across a crowded room, or
Mm-hmm.
or whatever.
Right.
And not that can't happen, but that is a fairy tale.
Right.
That's movies. That's
Right. But would you
um
say, because I feel like I've noticed this in Hollywood too, um, is that, like, take the movie Enchanted. I
yeah,
think that was a Disney movie. I can't
yeah,
remember. And there's like, this Disney, or there's this princess and it's magical and everything, but then she gets into real world New York.
yeah.
And it's almost like meant to communicate, yeah, but that's not the real world.
Yeah,
And like even just sitcoms, whether it be Modern Family or one my wife and I watched is This Is Us. It's not a sitcom, but
yeah,
a drama. And a lot of mixed families with there's like divorce and remarriage and broken relationship and like, would you say? I feel like you could disagree with me if I'm like messing up your soapbox, but I feel like you and I grew up
yeah.
in the magical everything's wonderful phase,
Hmm.
and then everyone's marriages started falling apart
Hmm.
and everyone's growing up in broken homes. Now I feel like what I see a lot of time is people like don't believe enough in the magic of love, right? Like, it's a
Yeah,
jaded perspective.
right. I think that's the progression, because I think that in the 70s, when the when the decline of marriage, I think really kind of started to take hold, maybe in the late
Well,
60s.
yeah,
But
there's the free love and
right,
all that.
right. I think that was kind of the beginning of all of that. Those people, that generation, uh, felt like that they had the whole starry-eyed,
Hmm.
rose-colored glasses view of love, and then when real life happened, they still thought that real love was out there somewhere.
Uh-huh.
This person must not have been it, but that real love
Yes.
was out there somewhere. And then the progression over the years is that now we have a generation, because of the examples that they've had, is just basically giving up on the whole thing.
Right. Yeah, I like what you said about like I chose the wrong person, because
Yeah,
I feel like so much emphasis is put on that in our
yeah,
culture. Like, man, I mean, just think about the pressure. Like, I've got to choose the right person.
right.
I told Alicia this week, we were just talking about marriage, And I was like, I completely lucked out because I was 22 years old. And sorry if you're 22 or under, but I didn't know crap. I mean, I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I still kind of don't know very much. And I'm like, I know a little bit more than I did when I was 22. But like at 22, what did I know about like a lifelong covenant
Yeah, right.
and like
Yes.
all that would go into it and raising it? Like I was not prepared for life or the world.
Yeah.
Like and yet God brought me this wonderful woman. And when you read the Proverbs and what it talks about, I mean it's a father speaking to his son, but he says you know essentially like a righteous wife, a wonderful wife is a gift, a reward from the Lord. This is one reason, like when I was a youth pastor, I would say like, hey, this whole idea of like I'll leave God when I'm young
Yeah.
and then I'll commit to him on my
Mm.
deathbed,
Yeah.
give him my dying breath. Like that's the dumbest thing that you could do.
Yeah.
Don't you want God on your side when you're making the biggest decisions of your life?
Yeah. No kidding.
But I guess here's kind of where I really wanted to go with it. So I got lucky is how I feel, or to use a Christian word, blessed.
Right.
And I guess I think we make too much of the I have to choose the right person because historically marriages were arranged.
Yeah.
It wasn't even about
Yeah.
choosing. It was like your dad chose for you.
Yeah.
You didn't even get a choice.
Yeah.
And when you talk to people today, now I haven't, but I know people who have, who've been part of that culture, whether it be in India or whatever, where they do arranged marriages. They say things like, I grew to love
Right.
that person.
Yeah.
And what happens is when you give your heart to somebody and you really nurture a relationship, you actually can grow to love somebody
Yeah.
that you currently don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend that is approaching 70, I believe. But he, for well into adulthood, like I think this was in his 40s, maybe 50s, maybe even later than that. But most of his life, in the back of his mind, always questioned if he had chosen the wrong person. He had married the wrong person
Yeah.
until I can't remember the details, but I think he was at some conference or something, and maybe somebody was speaking, or maybe somebody gave him a word of knowledge. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they basically just said, "Hey, you're married to this person now, and
It
so
doesn't matter.
they are the right person
Yeah.
now. Whether that's God's perfect will or not, at this point, it is His will, and so she's the right person. So just move on with it and just accept it and let that go."
That's good advice.
Yeah, and so and it kind of spoke to me at that time when he was telling me this, um, because and I think a lot of men maybe struggle with this, especially a lot of Christian men that grew up in the church maybe and struggled with God's will in their life and that sort of thing. But because life happens and things don't always work out the way that you think they should, and so then you start to question whether that person is the right person. But it really is just
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
is what it is at that point. Whether or not maybe you did, maybe I mean it's highly possible you did make the wrong choice, but
Right. Like it's definitely possible to marry the wrong person.
right,
But I mean like but I like that advice because once that covenant is established, it's time to give your everything to that.
right,
And
yes,
so, I mean, I just think we put too much stock in it. And then when we look at the Bible, you don't see anywhere that it suggests that God has a goodie bag in heaven full of soulmates that he dispenses
yeah,
and or that like you're sitting on a dock just waiting for your ship to pass by and if you
of
happen
the
to
bay
like sitting
on
on
the
the no, but and if you just like happen to snooze at the wrong moment or miss
yeah,
it, like then
yeah,
he's gone or she's gone. Like it doesn't work that way.
yeah,
Like I don't know where we get that. And so, but honestly, I think we get it from our culture because
yeah,
I hear like non-believers in Christ, God, anything saying things like we were meant to be and she's the one and he's the one. That this sort of predetermined, predestined idea that like God predestined this person for you, and I'm like, like you don't even believe in God. Like
yeah. Who does
how
that?
are who
How does
meant
that
you
work?
to be? you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So I just think we put too much stock in it. We get that from Western culture. That's not the
yeah,
Bible. So
yeah.
um, anyway, but I just think culture generally has a jaded view toward love, and that's why I think this topic's important because we've got 40% of Americans now say marriage is obsolete. It's probably grown because I was like almost 10 years ago I think.
Yeah.
So 40% say it's obsolete. 7 in 10 are cohabiting or cohabitating, one or the other,
Yeah.
before marriage, and many of them are choosing not to get married. And they're kind of like choosing this middle ground of like, I don't want to go so far as to give a covenant that I might have to break. I
Right.
can get out of this one,
Right.
and yet I don't want to just like date around. Like I want some stability, and it's kind of this in between.
It's I've pondered this whole thing uh often, not often, but I've thought about this before, but the whole this whole idea of not getting married or not having somebody that you're committed to and that they're committed to you. At this point in my life, I definitely see the value of it.
Mm-hmm.
It creates stability in your life. Um, and there's that one person. If everybody else leaves you, this one person, there's a very very good chance that this person will not.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't Obviously we have divorce in our culture, and people have their own feelings and that sort of thing. But um, if you have a pretty solid marriage and you work on it,
Yeah.
then that person there's some safety and security,
There.
not total because she or he is still a person, but it's that knowing that here's the other thing too that I thought about when you were talking. You made me think of it was I had a friend that um, they had met each other. He and his now wife met each other, and they were living together.
Mm-hmm.
And they they had they she was a Christian, he was not. Um, they were not living obviously as God would want them to live. They definitely weren't married.
Mm-hmm.
Their lifestyle was not that way. Um, and then they got married, and so I just was having an honest conversation with him one time. I was like, "Have you ever shared, your life and your life story with your wife, and like what all the things that's happened to you and all the things you've done and that sort of thing, and even the worst things?" And he was like, "No."
Hmm.
And I said, "You might think about doing that."
Hmm.
And he couldn't even fathom it. And it took a long time for God to work on his heart, but it took a couple of years. And then he finally did. And it was hard.
So he found God somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I
Yeah.
left that out of the story. He did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and so he did. He ended up doing that, and it was hard
Mm-hmm.
because she felt I think she kind of felt betrayed a little bit, and she felt like she knew him, and then I don't even know what the story is.
Yeah.
He didn't tell me, so but it was kind of a bombshell to her, I think, and she felt hurt, but she got over it. And now what I was trying to explain to him back then is that if that person doesn't know everything about you, how can you really, how is there security in that? How is there
Mm-hmm.
true love? Because they don't really even really know everything about you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I think a lot of people don't understand about marriage is that it's meant to be that place of total vulnerability. So like in the first verse in the Bible about marriage explicitly, where you hear this quoted in every marriage wedding ceremony, where man will leave his father and
Yeah.
mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh, which means they will have sex.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
which will seal the marriage covenant. Um, and then right after that, it says of Adam and Eve, the first two humans, they were both naked and unashamed. That's the one you don't read in or don't hear in weddings.
Yeah.
Although it's probably just as applicable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, so you have sex, covenant, sealing, leave father and mother, all of that, and then they're both naked and unashamed. And then it's after they sin, they want to clothe themselves, they want to
Mm.
hide. And so what you see is there is a symbolism in their nakedness, and the symbolism is that of total vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about like hiding secrets and all that kind of deal and trust, that's really, it speaks into this issue.
Yeah.
So and it speaks into the issue of what sex and why like cohabiting and uh sex outside of marriage and all of that, why it doesn't fit with the biblical model
Yeah.
is that according to God, and I think this honestly agrees with I mean it agrees with a lot of people's spirits who are not just Christian. If you just think of like what is the most beautiful thing?
Mm.
Okay, like you got one end of the spectrum that says sex is just another activity.
Right.
Like I studied in college and took a philosophy class, and we studied there was the sex is just like playing tennis. As long as two people agree with it,
Yeah.
who cares?
Yeah.
Consent, and that's in our culture the gold standard is consent,
Yeah.
and that's it. But if sex was like if all sex communicated or if sex was just about like, hey, we just need to consent. If somebody forced somebody to play tennis, like it would be an inconvenience, but nobody would
Right.
really care that much.
Yeah. No.
If
And I would like to
somebody
see somebody force somebody to play
who
tennis.
will play, yeah.
I can
Well, read the
physically go over.
Andre Agassi biography. It's pretty much that. But
Oh, is it really?
yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, with his dad, long story.
Gotcha.
Um, but forcing someone to have sex, that I mean, without the grace of God intervening, that's with them for life
Yeah.
as something that they might not overcome. And
Yeah.
by God's grace, we can overcome that, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. But I'm just pointing out, we innately know, whether you're a believer or not, we innately know sex is something, maybe even if you wouldn't use the word sacred, Christians would, but
Yeah.
there's something deeply special about.
Yeah. It's different.
And
Yeah.
so that's why some people will say, well, I think that there's a sex with love approach as long as you love each other.
Yeah.
Well, here's why why the Bible says no, sex is reserved for that marriage covenant, because it's in the context of marriage and in marriage alone where we have a total safety with one another, where a husband and wife, they have
Yeah.
a lifelong commitment, because what sex is communicating is it's communicating through nakedness and mingling of bodies in nakedness is a total vulnerability, not just physically, but emotionally.
Yeah.
And all of our bodies have flaws, and emotionally, we all know that
Speak for yourself.
that we as as like I have a friend who has like a before he got saved, he got really drunk one night and he got a tattoo of like a big happy teddy bear on his
Oh
butt.
my God.
So
That's
every
awesome.
time he makes love to his wife,
Yeah,
there it is.
That's awesome.
We digress. We digress. But the point is that it's meant to communicate total vulnerability, like with all of my flaws and
Yeah.
mistakes we might have made when we were 22 years old that still live with us,
Yeah.
or whatever they are.
Yeah.
With all of our flaws, it's a total vulnerability, so I can be who I am, and through just the act of sex, a communication of I totally accept you just as you are.
Yeah.
And according to the Bible, and this is not just according to the Bible, but also like just according to natural wisdom. Like natural wisdom is I don't share my life story and deepest hurts and struggles with the stranger on the bus next to me.
Right. Yeah.
So if I wouldn't do that with my heart, why would I do that with my body?
Yeah.
And you say, well, because you love somebody. Well, again, what I would come back and say is that if that person isn't willing to trust their future to me, why should I trust my deepest secrets to them?
Yeah.
Because here your friend had secrets that he wouldn't even trust to his literal wife.
Yeah.
And lots of people are like that. And I love your advice because I think it's totally true. Husbands and wives should have zero secrets.
Yeah.
My wife knows everything about me and her, and vice versa. And this whole like looking at husbands and wives, like, I don't want to tell you my code to my phone, and don't look at my
Oh wow, yeah,
like, like already, I already know you're cheating,
yeah. Well,
or
it's
at least emotionally.
yeah. That's that level of vulnerability creates a level of trust. Like to me, I think I take this for granted.
Mm-hmm.
I think I take that part of me and Valerie's relationship not for granted between us, but what I'm saying is like I just think everybody's relationship is like that. And so I'll say things like I can't even think, but just along the lines of looking at other women or something along those lines, or commenting like,
Mm-hmm.
"Wow, she's really pretty." There's a lot of women that get insecure about that because that level of trust is not there with their husband
Mm-hmm.
who's looking at that. Well, I'm not saying that that's good advice for everybody, but we have talked, me and
She
my
is smoking hot. Come on, Valerie, be okay with
yeah,
it.
right. But me and Valerie
But
have had a lot
what
of
you're
talks.
saying is you have a lot of trust.
Yeah,
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead.
yeah. So but in that, I have been honest with her. Even like there's in the past, there's been women that I've had contact with, not like I don't know, like just in life, right?
Yes.
Um, but I think me and you've talked about this before, not on the podcast, but there is a some sort of attraction there, and I don't even know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I would tell her about those. I would tell her about those moments, and I would say, I don't know what that's about, but I'm just telling you that's how I feel. I don't, and it's a weird feeling. Like
Uh-huh.
I can't even explain it. But
Right.
there's these moments with. It's only been a few times, like one or two times in my life, that I've had that experience. But I've had that experience, but I always tell her about it because I want her to know. I
Uh-huh.
don't. I want, you know, number one, I want my heart to be on the outside
Right.
so that she knows. Look, I have nothing to hide.
Right.
I'm not trying to hide this weirdness from you because
Right.
I can't even explain it. But I want her to know that where my heart is, and that
Right.
you know. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. So I think it all of life, I mean, really even starting with the courtship or the hanging out phase,
yeah.
as Stacy would say, um, to the talking
Mm,
stage. Okay, that from the very beginning, it's this journey toward that place of trust,
yeah.
and um, the Bible's teaching would be that it's not until you have that covenant where sharing all of your secrets, all of your flaws, being completely who you are, where you have enough security to really do that with heart and body.
Yeah.
And it's even sociologists have studied, I studied this in college, that emotional and physical intimacy are tied together.
Mm,
That's why when you fall in love, you want to make love.
right.
Okay? The reason why is they naturally go in tandem. And of course the scripture would say hold off until that day, because until that person has committed until death do us part, they're not they're not safe enough to trust the depths of your soul to.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to come to we said like 30 minutes ago we
Yeah.
were gonna look at the Song of Songs, and
Yeah.
we started telling Valerie and Alicia stories.
Yeah. We did.
So let's go back to Solomon stories. But this is really what I mean, I'll just kind of go big picture with what Song of Songs chapters 1 and the beginning of chapter 2 discuss. Uh, you have this woman named Shulamith. She's basically like this Hebrew Cinderella. And the reason I call her that is you see in chapter 1, verses like 4 through 6, she starts talking about how her brothers were angry with her, they
Mm,
enslaved her. And so it's kind of like if you have the picture of Cinderella with her evil stepsisters,
yeah.
putting her to work and saying, "You're never going to get a prince." Well, before there was ever a Cinderella, there was Shulamith. And her, she was cared for by her brothers because her father, for whatever reason, was out of the picture.
Mm,
That was their culture. If a father died or abandoned or whatever, the brothers would take care of the sibling and the daughter particularly. And so they're supposed to take care of her, but instead they're angry with her and they enslave her.
Mm.
And so as she's, being enslaved, she's, her skin's getting all like sunburnt and cracked in the sun, and so she's conscious of her flaws. She's had this injustice of with her brother. She has this loss of her father. She has all these obstacles
Yeah.
to overcome. And and yet we see in the midst of that she falls madly in love with Solomon. She puts herself out there in Song of Songs chapter 1 verse 7. She says, now it's kind of like, you know, metaphorical language here where she says to Solomon, "Tell me where you pasture your flocks." And and really what she's saying here is she's saying, "Hey, Solomon, I know you're a celebrity. I know you're this powerful king, but I want to know you more than just as a powerful king. I want to get to know your real heart as an ordinary guy, like one of us, like just like you're a shepherd. I want to know you in your gentleness and your humanity and your ordinariness, not just in your celebrityness." And so that and so what you see is Shulamith is she's starting to sort of break out of this, I've been slaving away,
Yeah.
and she puts herself out there. And I think that, like, for those in dating, the first thing I would say, at that stage, is that if you want to discover that spark of love, there has to be this degree of putting yourself out there. There has to be, and I think, the Bible, which is so often considered regressive modern day, this is actually
Yeah.
pretty progressive that you have the woman actually initiating
Yeah.
the dating relationship. And so I think ladies should feel a freedom to, I'm not saying that like you should go around like asking every guy and their dog out. Certainly not their dog.
That would be weird.
That would be strange, to say the least. But what I am saying is, Alicia, she invited me over to her house for a meal, and I always say she won my heart through my belly. And it's just you can do some things to make it known you're available, and that is
Right.
okay. And so she puts herself out there, but she also overcomes her own personal obstacles. And so I think, we tell her, and this is before you, like in this courtship, hanging out phase, whatever you want to call it, before you ever experience the obstacles of an actual romantic relationship, you have obstacles to overcome in your own heart.
Yeah.
And so for her, what she does is she sort of talks herself into it. And so, like in verse 5, when she says, "I'm very dark but lovely, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon." She's had these other like fangirls of Solomon saying, "You're ugly and you look like a peasant, and your skin looks like a baked teepee."
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Don't
Yeah.
know.
And she says that's what she means when she says dark like the tents of Kedar.
Yeah.
She's saying it's not a racial thing. It was a social class thing. Like they're kind of like saying, "How are you ever going to get this king when you've been out in the sun all day?"
Yeah.
And she says, "I think my skin's like the curtains of Solomon." She's kind of talking herself into it. And so I think a lot of people talk themselves out of ever falling in love.
Yeah.
And they're just waiting for the magical soulmate to fall.
Yeah.
And it's like God's like, "Well, you do have to kind of make it. You can't sit in the corner and snaggle tooth and stink eye and expect a guy to approach you, or gal
Yeah.
for that matter."
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so as the
That
story,
stink eye is attractive,
Yeah.
though. let me
as
tell
the
you.
story progresses, Solomon kind of says yes, and they kind of interact and get to know each other. But where really wanted to point out is kind of to circle it back is we'll go to Song of Songs chapter 2 verse 3. She says, "As an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. With great delight I sat in his shadow. His fruit was sweet to my taste. He brought me to the banqueting house. His banner over me was love." So what's happening here? What's happening here is she's just gone from talking about this injustice, this loss, this pain that she suffered, and the ongoing metaphor in verses 4 through 6 is the burning of the sun.
Yeah.
She feels the burning contempt of her peers. She feels the burning anger of her brothers. She feels the searing loss of her father. And so there's like that kind of ongoing metaphor. But now she says in Solomon she's found shade.
Hmm.
And she says shade as an apple tree within the forest. She's had bad experiences with men. Dangerous forests are dangerous.
Right.
And so with her brothers, with the loss of her dad or abandonment, we don't know. She's had just not great experiences,
Mm.
and it's hard when you grow up with that to trust.
Yeah.
And yet now she's in this place of trust, which we've talked about, that growth in trust that God wants to bring about.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of finding and discovering or rediscovering the magic spark of love. But then when she goes on and she says, when she says that he brought me into his banqueting house, the literal translation is wine house.
Mm.
And it's a reference back to earlier when she says your love is more intoxicating than wine.
Mm.
And it shows us these two sort of phases and seasons of their relationship. At the beginning, it was all puppy love and intoxication and butterflies and warm fuzzies. But now she's in this place of secure love and contentment as she's gotten to know him. And there's still that sort of intoxication,
Yeah.
but it's not just a glass of wine, it's like a whole wine house.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and it's like this, because she has the security of that loving relationship, she has this sort of ongoing access
Mm.
to the intoxication that love brings.
Yeah.
And but it all comes in the context of, through getting to know Solomon, she has learned to trust him, and he has trusted her. And that trust, that openness with one another, has taken them to a place, again, where I would say, where it's not just puppy love, but secure love.
Yeah.
They're still not married yet. It gets more secure and better as the song goes.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
So
So
it just it grows in depth
yes.
as basically that's kind of what you're saying, that the banquet is really a basically saying that the depth of the love has
Yeah.
grown.
Yeah, and there's another stage that's kind of layered in here, and that is whenever it says that he brought me to his banqueting house and his banner over me was love,
Mm.
what it's saying there is that their love relationship is where at first she's like, I want to know you as a shepherd, as an ordinary guy, and they've kind of gone in private and gotten to know each other. Well, now the relationship has become public. And so, like,
Mm.
if you're ever with somebody that they're like, well, I want to just know you in secret, but like, in public,
Let's pretend like we don't know
yeah.
each other.
Or even if it's vice versa, in public, yeah, everything's wonderful, but
Yeah.
in private, he or she doesn't want to give you the time of day.
Yeah.
Like true love, deep love is consistent
Yeah.
between them. And so, excuse me, and so Solomon has now taken this Hebrew Cinderella and paraded her before the whole world and said, "This is my girl." And everyone's like, "Whoa."
Mhm.
And so she follows up with that by saying, "I'm sick with love." And so the relationship has progressed. I think in modern equivalents, a little bit like when you're dating somebody and then it reaches the point where it's like, it's time to meet the family.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, that's a
Yeah.
big step. And it takes you to a new depth. Well, that's true in the getting to know you early stages, but it's also true in the advanced stages later in marriage, where you continue to grow in depth and security
Mhm.
of love as you continue to grow in trust with one another over time. And there are just kind of stages in that. And we'll talk about one of those stages next week when we talk about growing in trust some more.
Nice.
Yes.
Awesome. Well,
Well,
what I have to say is that if you have enjoyed this conversation,
and if
we would. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think that some of our listeners might have a case of subscribitis.
Yeah.
So if you have subscribitis, that means that you've not subscribed to this podcast.
Yes.
You can go into any podcasting app and click on Guy in the Pew or type that in. You can go to YouTube and you can subscribe there as well. And it's this button that's magical. It says
there's not really a cure, or there is a cure, but there's not a prescription or like a thing that really helps you through this disease. You really just have to push through.
You have to push subscribe.
You do. And
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I got subscribitis fever. You got to catch it, man.
That's it.
And then cure it by
Yeah,
clicking
pushing
subscribe. I don't know
yeah.
where this analogy is going anymore. But Stacy said to stop. So anyway, we'll stop. But anyway, hopefully that in the last 40 minutes of this podcast, you have discovered or rediscovered love.
Yeah. Hopefully we did our job.
Hopefully we helped you.
Yeah.
So with that said, let me close this with a word of prayer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heavenly Father, we love you. We thank you. Thank you for each of our listeners, and we just pray that you would be with them and bless each of our listeners, anyone who wants to find love. Lord, I pray that you would help us to overcome the obstacles in our own hearts, and Lord, to find that love that we desire. And Father, for those who want to rediscover love, I just pray that you would bring that spark into our marriages, into our romantic relationships, and that you would continue to give us practical steps on how to do that. And so, Lord, I just pray that you do those things. Bless each of our listeners in Jesus' name. Amen.
Man.